Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6 o'clock. And as I was saying, Marshall, before you joined, I made a mistake on the posting the agenda. I listed bylaws 7, 8, and 9 when we actually did 7 last week. It was supposed to be 8, 9, and 10. So we'll go ahead and do 8, 9, and 10 if that's okay with everybody. Is there any? I don't see anybody joining us for public comment. So I think we're good there. I didn't see minutes come over, so I think we'll skip over that. And does anybody have any new business?
The only minutes we had were from the past, I think, 2 sessions.
Didn't we approve those at the last meeting?
I did not do minutes for the presentation that General Code did, but I think there were minutes from April 1st and the 8th.
Yeah, we didn't do those last week.
No, we didn't. Hang on. No, the last one we did, I think, was the 25th.
Well, I had the 25th, March 25th and April 1st on my list to do last week.
Hang on. Well, I'll tell you, we don't need to debate it all. We can catch up on it at, okay, the minutes of the 25th and the 1st, in fact, were approved.
Okay. So then
So I guess we're up to date.
we're up to date on those. So
I take it all back.
so from last week's meeting, if you could just bang something out that said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we're up to date on minutes. That's good. Any new business from anybody about anything? All right, just I talked to Brian today. He has not yet spoken with General Code. He has the contract and all that information, so I expect that that'll get worked out early next week. I know he was working to get the warrant articles done for town meetings, so that's in process. And we got that covered. So let's jump into the general bylaw review.
Bill, I have to ask a question. Have you talked to Lorraine about the decision?
About the what?
About the decision?
No, I sent her an email.
Okay.
I sent, and I thought I copied everybody on that. I sent it to her the next day, and I told her that basically that the board had, the bylaw review committee had recommended that we go with General Code, and I thanked her for her submittal, and I even sent her a copy of General Code's proposal. I told her as a courtesy, I wanted to send over to you what we agreed on so that she would have that document if she wanted to look at it as well.
Oh, good. I mean, that was good. More than you had to do.
Certainly, we wanted to be upfront with her, and I think you look at what she was proposing and what she could provide versus what General Code could and what we agreed to move with. I think that was in the best interest of the town. So I think we're good as far as that goes.
Okay.
Any other questions? Perfect. All right. So let's pick up with general bylaw number 8, which is records and reports. Does anybody have anything that they picked up in reviewing that one that warrants discussion or further looking at?
This is Glenn Hathaway. I did not.
Okay.
Go ahead, Walt.
Go ahead, Marshall, because I know you're going to say the same thing I'm going to say.
Are we talking 10 days here? How many boards and commissions actually prepare and file their minutes within 10 days of the minutes approval? And I'm not saying that should be changed, but it's something that I think, all boards and committees should be aware of, but that's what it says and that's what we should do.
I was going to say something similar to this whole section 1 and section 2. I thought section 2 is fun, is good, but I wish everybody complied with it.
Yeah.
And same with the first section. I kind of wanted to know, it says, said books shall regularly be kept in appropriate places. Okay, tell me where the appropriate places are, because I know nobody knows.
Right.
And except when in the custody of an authorized official, who's that authorized official? It's like, the only thing is it kind of leaves it open, but nobody follows these rules anyway.
Yeah, I actually had a good part of section 1 highlighted as well. The 10 days, obviously. I know even with the Board of Selectmen, we get our minutes, but it's 2 weeks before, you meet again, so you can do anything with it. So how do you file? You can't file the minutes until they're approved. And I guess maybe you could right after you approve them. But so I just put a big question mark on that one. And I felt, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I think sometime this week or last week, I sent you out that email that had the little record there of when we are dealing with these things and what we need to do. So I just think we'll probably mark that down as needs additional work. And because nobody's keeping a book, I suspect that the person that's supposed to get them is the town clerk. I guarantee you that's not happening. And with, the way things are today with electronic minutes and things like that, I think we need to take a hard look at that. Somebody somewhere probably has an updated version of how you should handle these records and reports. So
I have one other question.
Okay. No, go ahead, Walt.
Oh, I have one other question, and that's, can somebody interpret what section 4 says to me? Because I've read it multiple times and my little brain can't figure it out. I mean, I just don't know what it's saying and what it means and what's the purpose of it.
question mark on that one too, because I don't know what you do with that.
Well, I first of all, I think the last line, it should be be, not by.
If be printed either separately or as part of the annual town report. But I just I only highlighted or noted that section as it just sort of seems superfluous to me, and I don't even know what exactly its purpose is. But maybe I'm just not, I'm not used to reading these bylaws. Maybe somebody can educate me on it sometime.
No, I think it needs to be clarified.
Yeah, I think it's, again, it was amended back in 2008 too. I wonder what the old one said.
You don't want to know.
Okay, Paul.
I'm sorry, Glenn. I think I interrupted Glenn.
Yeah, that's fine. I was just going to go back to section 1 on the 10 days for the Board of Health. We meet only once a month unless we have something special. So typically this 10 days, I think, is pretty arbitrary because after 10 days, 2 weeks, the town hall is usually calling, someone on the board, typically me as the chairperson, going, come on, get me the meeting minutes. I need to publish them so we have them for the next meeting. So whether it's 10 days or 20, again, I meet once a month. So it's really sort of the taskmaster, come on, get these out. So I'm not sure. Are there other committees that meet every 2 weeks?
Yeah, I mean, but keep in mind that the way it's worded is shall file with the town clerk copies of the meeting minutes within 10 days from approval. So even though you meet once a month,
Right, you don't approve it until the next meeting.
You don't
Right.
approve it, and so once you approve it, you've got 10 days, but that may be 40 days later.
Right, right. Okay, all right. Okay. Got it.
Okay, well, we'll mark that down with some big question marks. Next up is Chapter 9, Legal Affairs. So anybody have anything?
Just a couple of minor things. The town, section 1, the town administrator shall be agents. So we have one singular and you have one plural. So should this in fact be, shall be the agent?
Yeah, good question.
That was one. And then in section 4, it talks about our town council for the term of 1 year from the first day of April. I mean, I don't know how Debbie's contract works, but is it on an annual basis or is it more of a long-term thing?
I think it's done on an annual basis. It's probably more of a formality than it is. I know, again, this is my first year on the board. I don't know that it comes before a vote of the Board of Selectmen to appoint her for another round of to be town council or not, but I'll find out.
I'm just, you know, all I'm saying is that the bylaws should reflect whatever it is we do, in fact.
Oh, that's a good point.
I just had two things on this section. One was just saying I'd love to hear what Deb thinks about this section, which I think kind of relates to what Marshall just said. You know, what is it we actually do? And, you know, if anybody knows what the town council's responsibility is, it's Deb, so she should weigh in on how this thing is worded and if it works. And the second thing was just a general question about essentially saying that the Board of Selectmen can only, you know, authorize payment, you know, in settlement or claims up to, but if it's in excess of $10,000, it needs to go to a town meeting. How does this work when you settle matters in personnel matters and things like this? It's more a question than I'm not really debating any of this section. I just don't quite understand. I think it just raises questions about, you know, what the Board of Selection would do and can't.
I had the same concern, given obviously somewhat recent activities where settlements were reached. I don't know whether that was brought before town meeting or not, but whatever.
Yeah, I have both section 2 and section 3 highlighted. And I was so concerned about it, I used 2 different colors. So I don't know how in section 2, you know, for example, if you get a settlement on something and it's covered by insurance, is that the same thing as if it's something where you know, it's town dollars that you're paying for it? So I think that needs to be clarified for me. And then section 3, where it talks about, you know, preparing an annual report, basically about all the actions that have been brought against the town. I don't know how you could do that. I know it's not happening. I don't know how you do that with, you know, all the confidentiality clauses and the things that are going on, and by publish, if you were to publish something like that, does it in fact compromise your position because it's now public knowledge that there's some sort of litigation going on something, and then you've got the whole personnel issue. I mean, there could be, I mean, I don't see it, but there could be pending litigation going on right now with personnel that we would have no idea that it's going on.
Yeah.
Because of the nature of it. So again, I've got big question marks on specifically those things. So we are definitely going to have to talk to Debbie about that and see if she can fill the gaps in for us. And I'll be curious to see once we get going with this process with general code, what they come back with on some of these things and how they compare what our concerns are versus what their concerns are. All right, anything else on chapter 9, legal affairs?
No.
No.
Next up, chapter 10, junk and secondhand dealers and collectors. And I had a couple things on here, but I'll open it up to
I
everybody.
can't wait for this one.
You mean right now you can't wait for it, or when we get to actually doing it?
I can't wait for this one. I read this thing and it's, I think it's fascinating. Obviously we don't follow it. At least there's plenty of people with more than 2 junk cars in their yard. And we ought to add cars and boats, by the way. If you think of, we have at least one case I can think of that's turned into a junkyard for boats. But I mean, this is quite. I know Marshall already suggested this be in another place in our bylaws.
Yeah.
But I think this really raised who polices this. What are the fines for breaking some of these rules? When does the line get crossed as being a junkyard or just a junkie house? I mean, it's really, it raised a lot of questions with me. But I mean, rather than me going through my highlighted, I just opened with that statement and let everybody else comment.
Well, it says that in section 7F, any person or entity who violates this law shall be liable for a fine of $50 for each day said violation continues. So
that's true.
It does articulate a fine, but again, if nobody's enforcing it, then you could say it's $1,000 a day. Nobody's going to care. But you know, generally speaking, it's interesting because you know, I had said to my wife when I was looking at this, is a boat considered a motorized vehicle? You know, because I actually went on Google Earth and just 2 days ago and downloaded a picture of Ashburnham Marine of that property, you know, from Google Earth. I was shocked with the amount of boats that are out in the woods there on that property. It's
yeah, it's a junkyard for boats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just curious. I mean, you're supposed to hold a public. I mean, how many licenses do we have for junkyards in Ashburnham?
I don't know if we have any.
Yeah, I don't know that I can recall anything coming before the board for over the years, but I mean, certainly it could have happened, but I'm not aware of it. Hey, Glenn, a Board of Health question for you. On something like Ashburnham Marine with the, you know, with all the stuff that's going on up there, does the Board of Health have any jurisdiction on that, or is it somebody else?
Yeah, I have to go right to Rick. The calls that we've gotten in the past is typically a trash. The trash is piling up in the neighbor's yard and stuff, and then there's that rodents and everything else comes. So it's usually that type of issue. I've not been called about. I'd have to go to Rick and look at our records and see how many calls we've gotten about junk vehicles. I don't recall any right now. So whether the Board of Health would handle that, you know, the issue becomes with that many vehicles, there's oil and gas in those things. So they rot out, boom, and then the public, you know, the groundwater is contaminated. So those would be the issues. I'll go to Rick and I'll ask.
Yeah, I'd be curious to know specifically about Ashburnham Marine too.
Okay.
Because probably the motors have been taken off those things, so there aren't fluids in there, but that stuff is just rotting and certainly going into the, you know, going into the ground.
Yeah, I have to say I've been on the board quite some time. I don't recall ever getting anything for the marina at this point, but I'll confirm that and I'll send you back an email. Okay.
That'd be great.
The only other thing is that section 1 through 6 seem to refer to, you know, large scale entities like the one just over the town line in Winchendon that has, I don't know I forget what it's called. across the street from the motocross thing that has a
Yeah.
gazillion cars and trucks. Whereas section 7 seems to deal with one's personal storage, if you will. But, you know, it says no person shall keep in the open. So if you hide it, you don't need a permit under the bylaw. I don't know. I just think we need to be. It needs to better define the retail end of things versus the personal storage of. Because again, it seems like sections 1 through 6 are more like, you know, I'm a commercial dealer in junk.
Mhm.
As opposed to 7, which is, you know, I just like to keep my old cars trashed up and stored on site. Anyway, I just, that was commercial versus personal, seems.
It's my understanding, Marshall, that if you put the stuff in a garage,
Yeah,
it changes the whole status of what you're doing.
that's what I was getting at. It says, shall keep in the open. It's like, so if you keep it in the garage, you know, you're good.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that limit, if it wasn't a commercial place, wouldn't that just limit how many vehicles a person could put in a garage? So
That's,
that might limit and keep it under, but I think obviously, most of the complaints we get in town, what I've noticed in the past, you know, it's a complaint from a neighbor.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
and then when it gets out, and then it goes to the police and goes to the to Board of Health, and the Neshoba usually gets a call.
Right.
So, but to your point, in today's, I guess, yeah, if you got a big garage, maybe you have 2 vehicles, unless you have a really oversized garage. So that, I think the size of the structure would keep down the number of vehicles that could go in there. Not to say that someone couldn't do that. So again, I guess it's, when someone has an issue and then there's a complaint, then we go to look at it. So that is the tough, but I think you're right. I think we need more detail, the personal versus retail. And Winchton's a good example. You go over the line and there's a junkyard of cars.
Right.
So should we?
I mean,
Yeah.
that's obviously a commercial and they're licensed to do whatever they do there, but that's not to say, you, me, or anybody else, can operate that way, so.
Yeah.
It's also been my experience, Marshall, too, that the fire department gets involved with this, because if there's ever a fire of any kind, the fire department wants to know what type of a situation he's sending his men into, and rightfully so.
Well, particularly given, tires will burn forever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sort of raises sort of the whole enforcement issue that I think should be clarity about who is responsible for enforcement or review of this, or, I understand that the Board of Health gets a lot of the complaint, but it's not their purview. I was interested also in section 5, where I thought it was strange, where it said such book shall at all times be open to inspection of the selectmen. And it's like, is there any other business that the selectmen have the right to check their books? I mean, it's more of a question than anything else, but it was curious to see, and is that inspection tied to their license?
Walter, if I may, the chief of police usually does that inspection. And the reason for that being is that junkyards are how should I put it? The temptation would be there to chop up stolen vehicles. So the police chief inspects them on an annual basis or more if he wants to. And he wants to see receipts of all the vehicles that are coming in and where they're going to prevent the chop shop from opening up. Because
Oh, okay.
that's the reason for that being in there, is to make sure that there's not stolen vehicles being parted out.
That makes sense. That makes sense. That's interesting. But maybe we shouldn't say inspection of the selectmen. It should be clarified as to who's doing that.
Well,
Yeah.
Walt, it does have a, by the selectmen or any person by them or by
Yeah.
law authorized to make an inspection. But again,
Yeah.
I think better clarity is always a better way to go for us.
Yeah, it's probably fine as is, but I just I didn't know that, Dave. That's very helpful.
Yeah, and that kind of makes sense, Dave, like you said. So very good.
And I think it probably speaks to section 6 where, you know, such activities can't be conducted with a minor who shouldn't be dealing with cars anyway.
Okay, anybody got anything else on that one?
No,
All right, so now I got myself confused. So I said 8, 9, and 10, but I may have meant 8, 9, and 10 and 11
I think you did.
because
Yes.
I wanted to stop before we got into construction because
Yeah.
I thought that Sarah would want to be involved with that. So anybody have anything on 11, use of public ways and places?
Let me count the ways.
Yeah. I thought this ties with a lot of similarities to the scenic road bylaw. Certainly needs to be, you know, grouped appropriately. But take it away, Marshall.
I think my biggest concern is, you know, I don't have a problem with, although we do need to look at the fine related aspects, which in this case is $300. You know, I think we need to, as we've talked about before, look at all these fines and maybe delete them from the bylaws themselves and just have a separate section that addresses fines. But anyway, I don't have a problem with the superintendent of highways being the one that issues the permit, but there really needs to be, in my mind, a public hearing associated with it. You know, you drive around town, wherever, and you all of a sudden see a curb cut, a driveway. It's like, whoa, you know, where'd that come from? And I just think that most everything else has a public hearing process, and I think this is definitely one that is deserved of one as well.
Okay. I agree. I agree with that. It's obviously there, you know, every time you turn around, there's a couple of more down the road from us that which is a scenic road. This magically appeared, and you know that nobody went through the process there. So.
Well, and it's just, you know, again, no names, no whatever, but it just seems it shouldn't be up to one individual to do that without some discussion by the town at large, or at least given the availability for the discussion.
And, you know, a lot of this, you mentioned fines. So many of the things that we're dealing with or looking at all circle back to enforcement. You know, again, you can have a great bylaw, but if nobody's doing anything about it, and I got to tell you, unless you start holding people accountable for some of these things, it's going to be the wild, wild west. People are going to do whatever they want to do.
Welcome to the Conservation Commission. you know, oh, I needed a permit for that? Anyway, that was my primary concern, was that a little more transparency, a little more public involvement.
You know, I'm just looking at the things that I've got here too. This section 7, you know, snow and stuff like that in the road. That's something that when I sent my initial inquiry out to the department heads, that was something that Steve Nims came back with, that he said
Yeah, he did.
is a problem for them. So I highlighted that in here as well. So that's something that
Well, you know, mea culpa, you know where I am. I come down the driveway, I got no choice except to push it across the road, and as out of the way as much as I can, which means over the side of the other side of the street of Russell Hill Road. And, you know, I do my best to try to clean it up, but, you know, is there debris? Yeah. You know, but
no,
I mean,
and listen, we've all had situations like that. And for me, I'm not so sure if that's even the biggest problem, where you go by, people are literally snow blowing it out into the,
well, okay,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
which it's, you know, again, you know, when I plow a little bit of snow across Russell Hill as well, and I always go back and clean it up so there's nothing that's going to freeze and make a
right.
mess. So it's not like we're depositing it in the road on purpose. It's a
And
means to make
leave
you
it
have to
there.
go across it. Yeah.
Right, yeah,
I think there's people that are, you know, again, you get out in some of the other areas where they're cleaning out driveways and they're leaving, you know, 1 foot piles of snow across the
Yeah.
whole driveway. And again, depending on the conditions, if that happens to, you know, get colder and freezes there, then, you know, you got a speed bump, and which is a dangerous operating situation.
well, and yeah, and then it becomes dangerous to the traveling public. But
You know, an item like this, and we did the right thing going out to the department and said, gee, we're going to do this bylaw committee, we're going to review. What are your issues? Because something like this, some people just don't know that. They don't know I can't push the snow there and into, they think it's out of the way. So with things like this, depending on how frequent they are, these are things that you send out a notice once in a while, you know, pre-winter. Hey, you know, just be aware that, you know, there's a bylaw, you shouldn't be pushing snow or diverting water into the public way. You know, other than that, I think it's still going to happen. But you know, I think there's some cases where people didn't know that. And you know, if you're in a neighborhood and you're pretty crowded and your plow's pointed out in the morning, that's where you're going to push the snow. So I think this happens. And, you know, again, I think that's a call that people make. Hey, did you know such and such, and whoever that goes to the town or to the police. Obviously, again, the town department has had some issues, or he wouldn't have said that. But again, maybe we take that and we send out a flyer, and we do it in September, October, and let people know.
Yeah, and also as we work on cleaning up our website, you know, that would be a good vehicle to, you know, to have a reminder out there early in the year that, you know, and post the bylaw right there. And, you know, you can't do this. And again, not everybody's going to see it, but you try to make it as available as possible so that they may come across.
Well, that makes the enforcer, whether it's the police or town, it makes their job easier to go to point to that. Hey, look at the website. You know, we try to educate people. If someone says I didn't know, you know, you try to help that person who's going to the call. Go, you know, here it is. It's in the bylaw. You know, we try to post it. You shouldn't be doing this. So, you know, again, we're a small town. You try to make things work and make it, try to help people understand, you know, why we have our rules, and, you know, something like that's a big impact. It's on traffic, and it can be a safety issue, obviously. So, okay. So again, for Walt, no, are you still on, Walt?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So something like this is in the bylaw. No person shall shovel or throw snow. So, I mean,
Yeah.
what else do you want to do with this? Other than,
I had no issue with this.
okay. All right.
Yeah. Oh, that wasn't one of the ones I had. No, I'm fine with that. I was
You know,
curious, Glenn, you might know, has Section 8 ever had an issue? I mean, I thought when I read that, I assumed that would be a Board of Health matter, but you know, person owns a building, the sewage from which is flowing the amount off the property and onto and across the street.
Yeah,
And they can get permission from that by the Board of Selectmen. I just thought that whole paragraph was odd. It was more a curiosity thing than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, one, you would never, you know, how did they get a permit to go there? If someone's doing that, that's completely illegal, obviously.
Yeah.
If you've got raw sewage just pumping out somewhere into a field, that, and again, I would think at this point, as the town has developed, and you know, again, summer homes are now becoming full-time homes. I grew up in a summer area where that happened. You know, I'm talking the population doubled. Now you have homes that had the, you know, just the cinder block 50-gallon as their sewage. They only stayed there 2 weeks out of the year. So we've had that issue, but I think we've been up against that, as Dave knows, for 20 or 30 years because population is now staying here. And you know, people are converting your part-time to full-time. So it's not to say that this hasn't happened. And also, someone has bought property and not realize, you know, before we had inspections, maybe it's 30 years ago, that the sewage wasn't quite going to something, okay, or there was no grade. It really was a cinder block or old brick. So we shouldn't be having that. But it's not to say that it's not an older home doing. But you know, to Marshall's point of view, to read this, it's disturbing that if that was even happening. So, you know, do you leave it in? I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you get rid of it because at that point, you need a permit when you're doing stuff. And so,
Yeah,
obviously.
I would say it probably we should really think about just deleting it.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So,
Hey, Glenn, I have a question for you.
yes.
When we're talking about sewage and septic systems and things like that. So we have a lot of situations out in the lake areas where you'll see during the summertime, people have porta potties. So when I see that, the first thing I think about is that they've got a failed septic system. So is it legal to put, you know, porta potties out there if you potentially have a failed septic system?
Not necessarily. If it was poured on the ground, if that's a one-time situation and not into while they're getting something fixed, it might be. I would. We've gotten those if someone's having an event, and that
Yep.
might pull a
Yeah, I
permit.
get that. Yeah.
But if you've got a porta potty, that really that shouldn't be. If they have that big of an issue, especially obviously by the lakes where it could get in and again, you know, cause issues for the whole community. Yeah, that's a. I think that's a red flag. That, you know, why is that there? So I'd have to talk to Rick as far as when do we typically sign off on those. Those would be typically a construction site, whether it's a new building and or renovation. Maybe there's a porta potty, and they might go for a permit that's temporary. But if that thing's out there, you know, permanently, yeah, you could call the Board of Health, and it's probably illegal what they're doing.
You know, because we also have, and again, I know they're not documented. I've seen them as I drive around town and stuff. You'll have people that have a small piece of property and they put a trailer on it. And next to the trailer is a porta potty.
Yeah.
And is that kosher?
No, we've gotten calls on that. So that's probably one of our calls. It's not, we just had one. Actually, it was a request from someone who said, hey, I go out to this RV once in a while and I've gone out there enough. I'd like to, I think it was bring electricity out. So they were smart enough to ask that, and that's a red flag. Now they want to put power out there. Now it's no longer a camp. Okay, once you get the power, now they're there more often. The number one thing is sewage, and if they have an RV, okay, it's like having a tight tank for a house. But we have with something like that, with a tight tank on a house, we have a record of when it was pumped out. With an RV, we don't have those type of records. So someone requests electricity or the porta potty shows up, there's other things going on there, and at that point, that's again a red flag, and we should, Board of Health, our Rick Metcalf should be out there and asking, what is this for, how long, and so forth, so on. So that really shouldn't be happening.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Okay, anybody else have anything on, was it 11 we're looking at?
Yeah, I have just two things. One is in this section quite frequently, or at least several of the sections, we quote money and we have fines. And I'm generally speaking, I think anytime there's a reference to a specific fine or whatever in the bylaws, it should be allowed for the Board of Selectmen to, on an annual basis, set the fines and fees for the town, because we don't want to have to change the bylaws. Sometimes these fees just stay there forever because you're not going to go through a bylaw review and a change to change, a $50 fine to a $75 fine, and the economy changes. So that would be my just sort of all throughout this section, there are references to punished by a fine of $50 or, subject to a fine of $100. I think we shouldn't have that in bylaws generally. And then the second thing I thought was really interesting, because I know you, Bill, and Rosemary with the economic development, section 17 and section 18 gives you quite a bit of authority, I think, or some, at least through town center, which Route 12, for example, there's been talk about lowering that speed limit to 25, and all of these MRPC and everything saying that you need to have sidewalks that lower speed through the town. It sounds to me like the selectmen have the authority to do that. And I know Larry said, oh, you can't change it to below 30 because it's a state road. Well, it's not a state road through the middle of town. It turns out it's not a state road, for some section through downtown Ashburnham. So that is not it's not a criticism of the selected bylaws. It just alerted me to, you have a little bit more authority to set the fines and things about, like section 18, my note comment on section 18. Well, what about setting, fees and fines for that section? It says nothing. You have the authority, but what do we get out of it is my question. So that's all.
Well, yeah, I think you're right, Walt. Throughout these where we have references to fees, that we should change all of that and simply have a blanket statement that says, that the Board of Selectmen or whomever has the authority and to establish rules and regulations relative to fees for violating these things. Therefore, the rules and regulations only require a public hearing. They don't require a town meeting.
Yeah.
So get rid of all the fees and just every time you've got a fee or whatever, say, as it says, the selectmen shall make rules and regulations. Well, for fees, and then you have a separate fee list that can be changed whenever you want.
Much like I think they do in, when you're issuing building permits and things like that, plumbing,
Yeah.
things like that, there's a schedule of fees, and, there's
That's
a
right.
process that you have to go through, but it's something you don't have to amend the bylaw to do it. You just, propose it, have the hearing, do whatever, vote on it, and it's done.
Yeah, that's the same with our, with the wetlands bylaw. The fees are not in the bylaw, they're in the rules and regs.
Yeah, and then you have one common sentence that is, copied and pasted every section that
Yeah.
custody fee is possible that says, this is subject to a fee per the fee schedule of the Board of Selectmen or whatever it happens to be.
Exactly, exactly. Yep.
I had nothing else.
The only other thing that I had was section 20, where it talks about the scenic road. So somehow we've got to get ourselves in a position where we're actually enforcing that and starting to fine people for doing that, because it's, like I said earlier, it's kind of become the wild, wild west.
No, it's true.
Okay, anybody else have anything on this one?
No, no, again, it's just one of those items that requires, a close review and clarification.
Okay, so so that basically concludes what we're going to do as far as this meeting goes, and we'll get out a few minutes early tonight. But so for the next meeting, so we want to do the next 3 or 4. Is that the deal?
Sure, keep
That work?
going.
Keep going at it. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then I will. Let's see. Where's my list? So we're up through 11. Use of public way. So we've got, let's do 12, 13, 14, and 15 for next week. Well, I'm writing it down this time. 12 through 15 for next meeting.
Okay.
Okay, if nobody has anything else, then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, okay, then I'll make the motion to adjourn. Dave seconds it. I'll call the roll. Bill Johnson, yes. Glenn Hathaway,
Yes.
Dave Perry,
Yes.
Marshall Dennis,
Yes.
Walt Meisner.
Yes.
Excellent. I'm off to another meeting that I'm 20 minutes late for. So enjoy the night, folks. Walt, safe travels.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
All right, see you, folks.
Take care. Yep.